thankfully, I don't have the time to do this, but there's better men at work on it, better men and women working on this, of what the heck are you guys doing with this show? But I'll comment on it as just a private citizen, that the OneRing.net I trust will be the guardians of this. Still, I'm just repeating what they said, we have serious concerns about the behind-the-scenes production stuff. That's point 3, that's entirely separate from writing. They hired 2 showrunners with no prior credits, which for Game of Thrones people should be setting off alarm bells, though it is different. It is admittedly different. They talk about this in the article. They do have 12 years of experience as professional script doctors and have worked on many projects in Hollywood. They're well known. J.J. Abrams vouched for them. They worked on one of his movies. That they are experienced screenwriters. Benioff and Weiss didn't even know what screenwriting was, that it's a visual medium, that they would put... We later found out they kept putting vital exposition in the script notes to the actors, which... It's a basic rule that if it's not in dialogue, it doesn't count. That they were novelists. They don't know how screenwriting works. Basic screenwriting. In contrast, these guys do know how screenwriting works. They are veteran screenwriters. It's this whole thing of that they aren't credited for being script doctors on IMDb, but they have been working for 12 years on a variety of projects. Accepting that they know how writing works, they admittedly, by their own admission, don't know how to handle physical production. Logistics. They've never worked on the logistical sides of anything before, and now you put them in charge of literally the biggest TV show in history, $500 million budget. They talk about, well, we did hire up a different director to be the production guy. That is actually standard practice on many shows, that the showrunner actually doesn't know how to make it, but they delegate it to someone else. Benioff and Weiss were egomaniacs who insisted on micromanaging that under normal circumstances there would have been other people handling the logistics. They insisted on doing it even though they had no idea how to do the first thing. So that these guys don't have production experience, but they did hire another guy to help them who is the production guy, okay. But in the article, and we knew this already, they brag about, oh, so we brought in Game of Thrones Brian Cogman to help him. Cogman is just as much of a con man as Benioff and Weiss. He is not a professional screenwriter. He has no formal degree in screenwriting. And I have so many clips on my channel of him laughing along with them when they're joking, we don't know how production and logistics work. That he didn't know either. It's the blind leading the blind. Thankfully, there's a second guy who's actually more on there, and I am encouraged that Cogman has left the project. He will not be returning for season 2. So I think they're just mentioning him as they still think the name Brian Cogman might actually excite people instead of, it's Game of Thrones Brian Cogman. They think that'll excite people instead of turning them off. Cogman has left, so I have the impression that he didn't do that much compared to the other guy, the other producer they hired to direct the showrunners to help them with the logistics. But that's just from the logistics side of things, and they're throwing so much money at this that even if they're inefficient with it, I don't know, that I feel better once I saw that we don't have credits, but we have been professional script doctors for 12 years. Okay. But I have seen like the real hardcore fanatics online going, obviously they're the best because they won the audition process, that their pitch was the best. Therefore they were hired. And my whole argument is, I think they probably weren't the best choice. I'm questioning the wisdom of Amazon's choice. And the response is always, well, of course it's the best choice because it's the one they made. It's the circular logic of, maybe you shouldn't. And I keep thinking of this as, if you're coming here for Lord of the Rings, after Game of Thrones ended, when the showrunners embarrassed themselves by going to a writers' conference and basically spending an hour-long panel at Austin Film Fest, bragging about how unqualified they were. Prominent science fiction writer, female black science fiction writer, N.K. Jemisin, posted on Twitter this infamous tweet that circulated around, why didn't this project get the best, most talented, and the best in the field? You hired up unknowns for a major franchise. That is ridiculous when you stand back and think about it. And we saw them putting the same spin on Benioff and Weiss in the early seasons that they're putting on these guys now. They act like we're living in a movie. You know, that, no, this is, they're diamond in the rough unknowns who they're going to get the call to adventure. And so many stories are constructed like that, of the guy who has no training or experience is suddenly the chosen one plucked from obscurity who rises to the occasion. And they actually hyped up Benioff and Weiss like that it was just that they were these guys who got lucky, like in any band movie with music, that the garage band that hits it big. Everyone fantasizes about being that, but this is reality. Even Peter Jackson wasn't an unknown. He was a relative unknown. He was a career director. He'd done art house movies. He'd done a few horror movies. He was a professional director before he was hired. That people, oh, he's from the Frighteners he was probably well known for, but a couple of other things. Jackson wasn't a total unknown when he was hired for Lord of the Rings. Versus, this is the biggest show in history, and it is weird that we have people who haven't, and people going, well, then they must be really good. I'm willing to extend the benefit of the doubt, but don't take us for fools. Thankfully, this is a position the OneRing.net has, that, well, what are you doing story-wise? If you've told us nothing to impress us, we're waiting to be impressed. Versus, people you see on social media who are, based on the name Lord of the Rings alone, think it'll be amazing. Even when, like, the Hobbit movies had a mixed reaction, I still think they were more good than bad. And that had source material. Versus this, we're just based on the size and scale of this. You think it'll be amazing. And yeah, I did perk up when their first promo image a few months ago was, here's a promo image of the two trees of Valinor. My jaw dropped, I must admit, but trust but verify. And we were not amused when, under mysterious circumstances, Tom Shippey left the project. Tom Shippey, who has been one of the Tolkien scholars for years, you probably remember him from the DVD extras on Lord of the Rings. He was one of the main people interviewed talking about Tolkien and his works. Tom Shippey, he's written entire books. I own books by Tom Shippey on my shelf. And let me see what we have here. Let's see. The Road to Middle-earth. The Road to Middle-earth by Tom Shippey. I have it on my shelf right over there. And other stuff. And they pressured him off, and we don't know why he left. Was he leaving in disgust? Some think he was annoyed. They were annoyed when he just gave an interview, that they have a no interviews policy. But the OneRing.net has already mentioned this. That was actually quite a controversy when they forced Tom Shippey off. Doesn't instill confidence. Moreover, when they screwed over the entire New Zealand production team by after finishing season 1, after season 1 finished filming, they said, we're going to move everything to England. You see, they don't like they don't want like dealing with New Zealand's labor unions. When like this is Middle Earth, you can't replicate these landscapes. That's insane. And we already built all the sets. What are you going to do? Build new ones? So that's a whole thing. And maybe they will come back. Like the article actually says, maybe they'll come back in later seasons. Maybe this is due to COVID restrictions. That might be more reasonable. But we've had a beloved relationship with New Zealand for years. And with Tom Shippey, and you threw them both out, and you expect us to extend blind faith to you without any real inkling of what the story you're doing is. So those are the 3 points that I have concerns about the behind-the-scenes production, not as bad as Benioff and Weiss. Yes, these guys were career script doctors. Let's see what they can do. I will judge season 1 on its own merits, but I do not have blind faith in them. They need to prove that. Let's see what happens. Like, I didn't know Fellowship of the Ring would be good until I saw it in a theater. I didn't know Peter Jackson. So, worries, and not the writing. The writing doesn't worry me so much as, do you know how behind-the-scenes logistics works? Because this is actually really complicated on the biggest show ever. Behind-the-scenes concerns is point 1. They don't really address that. Point 2, I don't have a problem with different non-white races in this. This is going to be all over the world. This is going to be in Harad. This is going to be the Far East. This is going to be dealing with other lands. Okay, there's going to be different people around doing stuff. That isn't an issue for me. I would have done that. I would have put in Blacklocks dwarves and go, hey, here's a meeting of the 7 tribes, and some of them don't look white. I don't have a problem with that. Point 3, OneRing.net was thankfully already on that we are worried that will overshadow legitimate concerns about writing quality. That we're not, the thing that freaked me out the most from this preview was Galadriel meeting a white man on a raft in a shipwreck. This has nothing to do with race. That was the thing, because that involves canon characters. Is this a shipwreck and he's a Numenorian and their fleets were in a battle or something? I assume? Like, that had nothing to do with race. There's two white people in it. And that was the thing that seemed to be changing things in a way I didn't like more, versus, hey, here's dwarves in Moria before it was destroyed and some of them are black. Okay. That I don't want, they will use that as a shield against us to deflect any of the writing criticisms of original characters. That we're not complaining there's black hobbits, we're complaining you shoved in hobbits into this, even if they were all white, as a marketing gimmick. I would have put hobbits in as like a cameo to show here's the ancient hobbits in their wandering days, migrating, and we'd see them interacting with like the ancestors of the Rohirrim. That'd be fun. That's what I would do. I'd show this is where they were at this point in the Second Age, but not as integral first-tier cast members. It's the equivalent of in Star Wars, should we show Jawa in a crowd scene? Yes. Should Jawa be a main cast member? No. Just for the sake of selling toys. So trust but verify, and I'll have more to say after we see the actual first trailer with the Super Bowl.